Hello everyone! Today we are talking about slow, easy, loose florals. Now, if you've ever tried a loose watercolor style, you know slow, easy, and loose are not three words you might put together. But today that's exactly what we're going to do. If you're new here, my name is Teresa. I'm a surface pattern designer and watercolor artist. Well, lately I've been working on a project that required that I paint in a tight style. So when I wanted to make this video and I wanted to paint in a loose style, I had a little bit of difficulty transferring from the tight to the loose, which is a very common thing to happen. So, of course, I used all the tips that I gave you in another video on how to achieve a loose style. But I was still having trouble getting it to look the way I wanted it to look. So I changed the way I was thinking about it. I changed my approach just a little bit. So I thought I would talk you through that today and show you how I was able to achieve a loose style while slowing it down. When we're painting in a loose style, we typically paint not necessarily fast, but we do have a time constraint because we need to get everything accomplished that we want to accomplish before that pigment dries out so that those colors will merge together beautifully. I'm also going to tell you another Alaska story today. This is what we're painting today. So I'm going to leave it up for just a moment so that you can familiarize yourself with it, but then I'll take it away so that it's not a distraction. So I'm starting with the first petal and I'm starting with a creamy mixture, and then I'm going to my water vessel and getting clear water to mix on the paper. This will give us a nice soft blending. I'm starting with the creamy mixture because typically I paint loose florals with a lot of pigment and a lot of water in my brush at the same time. But if you're feeling a little stressed about not being able to paint loosely enough, or, you know, for whatever reason, things just aren't working the way you want them to work and you want a little more control, this is an easy way to do it. Start out with the creamy texture and then add water to it on your paper. And you can put the water exactly where you want it in this way. And I can go in and add some orange, which I will do here in a second. So I'm going to grab a little Winsor orange and, you know, just change some of those tones by adding some different colors while it's still wet. So this is still loose watercolors. It's just one way of doing it to maintain a little more control. And so really all I'm thinking about right here is I want some big fluffy petals, and I'm going to add some leaves. So I'm just watching and seeing where do I think I want leaves so that I can be sure to leave moisture there so that they can blend together when they touch. Now in loose florals, you don't have to have, you know, every time a different color, you know, you place a different color down, you don't have to touch it to something else so that it will mix. You just pick and choose. Where do you want that blending to occur? And I did not like that one stroke there that I just did, so I put water on it and blended it out. So now I'm going to put some leaves right here, and I'm just doing super loose leaves. You've seen me do these kind of leaves before if you've watched any of my other videos. So I have multiple colors of green on my brush, and I did not really double load it on purpose. It's just in my palette, in my mixing area, I have several greens that are mixing together. And so when I dip my brush into it, it automatically will bring out different greens. And, you know, I'm gonna leave some space over there where those leaves are because I want another, or I want a bud over there of some sort. But right now I think I'll put a flower down at the bottom here. I'm using the same method, putting the thicker creamy texture down first and then coming back with water to loosen it up. It's just a very easy way of doing this. So we're just going to take our time. We don't have to rush so much when we're doing it this way. You know, sometimes if you wanted to paint a bunch of different yellow flowers on the page, you might do all the flowers at once and come back and add in the greenery or leaves or whatever. But you know, that can be kind of tricky sometimes because you have all that empty space that can get awkward. So I kind of like doing it one flower at a time and then working out from that. You know, put whatever's going to be touching it around it and then just keep working out. That way you can kind of naturally fill those empty spaces between the flowers without it turning into something awkward. Or feeling like you don't have enough space for everything you want to put in there. I know I have plenty of time because I have not put water in a lot of different places on my paper that I'm having to juggle between, you know, watching to make sure that they don't dry out before I get back to them to place my leaves down, for instance. If I just do it as I go, then once I move on, I don't have to worry about that area of the paper anymore. Another way of doing this would be to section your paper off and do maybe the top half of your paper first and then do the bottom half, or maybe, you know, do quadrants on your paper. Any way that you want to section that off in your work area will work. I just like picking my hero bloom and then just building everything off of that. I will go back here in a minute and paint in my stamens. If you want yours to bleed into the petals, then you might want to do that a little earlier while the petals are still wet. Or you can place some clean water on top of them if they're very dry. Then you can always add the stamens at that point after you put clean water down, and it'll give the appearance of bleeding into those petals, but you kind of have to be careful with that, and it depends on how well your paper handles layering, you know, for you to do that. But I want mine to be very distinct, so I'm not going to have them merge. But you know, I do it differently all the time, back and forth, just whatever I'm in the mood for. Okay, while we finish this up, I'll tell you another Alaska story. So the reason why this story is kind of funny is because I do not like fishing, and this is a fishing story. So, you know, I love the ocean. I love being on any water. I love being on a boat, but I just do not care for fishing. I don't like dealing with the bait. I don't like touching the fish, you know, all those things. Well, when you live in Alaska, you need to embrace where you are. Or that's the way I feel anyway. And a chance to be out on the open water in Alaska and seeing glaciers and all the incredible wildlife. Yes, where do I sign up? Absolutely, I'm going on this trip. I don't care if it is a fishing trip. So this was in August of one year, and August is probably the warmest month of the year in Alaska, especially for the water. The water's always cold, but August is probably the warmest water temperatures that you're going to have because it's had some of the summer months and all those long sunny days to absorb some of that warmth. And I can tell you from experience, it is still freezing cold in August. because I did my scuba diving training there, and everything's in the pool except for the checkout dive, you know, your very last thing before you get your license. And that has to be done in open water. And I did mine in August in a dry suit because the water's still so cold. You have to wear a dry suit in August. But mine leaked, and that was incredibly difficult. It was so freezing cold. So anyway, that's how I know how cold that water is in August. But we went to Homer to take this fishing trip, you know, this fishing charter, really, out of Homer. And we had to be there at 6 a.m. to get on the boat. So we drove down to Homer the day before and spent the night in a hotel so that, you know, we could be there on time. Oh, wait, I want to point out right here, there are 3 spots where I overworked this piece, and this is one of them right here. That top leaf, I should have left it alone, but for some reason I wanted it larger, and I went back and it's just not working out that well. And then there are 2 more places coming up in just a minute where I do the same thing, and I would have been better off to have just left them alone. So just watch out for that, you'll see in a minute. I will overwork 2 more spots after this one. Anyway, back to the story. You know, they tell you when you book these charters that it is rain or shine, and they mean it is rain or shine. They are going. So we get up, and they also tell you to bring your winter gear because on the water it's cold. So we do. We bring all of our winter gear, and we get up and we get down to the dock, and it has predicted to rain that day, of course. So that's all right. It's okay. We're still ready for it. Little showers pop up all the time, and it's not a big deal. It'll rain for, 10, 15, 30 minutes, and then it's gone. But when you're on the water, the weather can be more extreme than what you may be used to seeing inland. So we get on the boat and start out, and the weather gets pretty rough. It took until 2 o'clock to find the fish. So we were halibut fishing. I don't know if I said that. And so they'll take you to one spot and they'll kind of see if the fish are there or not. And if they're not, then you move on to the next spot and you just keep looking for the fish until you find them. So it took us probably a couple of hours to get to the first spot. So you're just in this boat, just waiting and riding, and the weather's getting rougher. And the boat has this cabin, so you can all sit comfortably inside the boat, out of the weather, on the trip out there and the trip back. Well, it takes 2.5 hours to get to the first possible fishing spot, but we get there and there are no fish, so we have to move on. And the weather is just getting worse and worse as the day goes on, and people are getting seasick, like seriously seasick. So you've got the diesel fuel smell of the engine, you've got the marine head smell that goes with that, and then you have 16, 17 people who are seasick, and it was getting pretty miserable. They told us that we had 18-foot seas that day, and I believe it. It was an incredibly violent ride. And we didn't even find the fish until 2 o'clock. And, they're not going to turn around and go back just because the whole boat is seasick. I mean, by golly, you're out there and they're going to take you fishing whether you want to or not. So we find this spot where there are halibut, and there are only 3 of us that are not sick. So it was my husband and one other person and me. So we got to catch the whole boat's limit for the day. And we were just happy to get out of the cabin. I mean, while we were going out there, it was kind of hard to stay outside of the cabin because the weather was so rough. But once we got to where the fish were, it was a little bit easier to be on deck. But I mean, still, the boat is rising 18 feet, which is it's like a 2-story building. So the boat is riding up to the top of that 2 stories and then slamming down onto the water 2 stories below. And, you know, all this water comes up and hits you, plus it's raining, you're soaking wet. It was so incredibly cold. We had all of our winter gear on, and then we're trying to maneuver these fishing poles that are pretty big fishing poles. And halibut are bottom dwellers, so they're on the bottom of the ocean floor, and they're very flat. So they're very large and flat, and you're trying to pull that big flat surface all the way to the top. It was such a fun but painful day, you know, with all the elements going on. It was miserable. But the three of us getting to catch all these fish, and it was as soon as you could get your hook in the water, you would get a fish. So we were leaning against the railing of the boat, you know, and getting these fish up was really difficult. There were 2 guides there to help us, and you'd pull a fish in and they would take it off the hook, rebait your hook, and, you know, get you started again. And then take your fish off to be cleaned later. So they were working really hard. The boat was going up and down, and I have this fish on, and I'm fighting with this fish to try to get it to the top. and I'm leaning hard on the railing. And the boat is, you know, flying up and down, ocean water splashing in your face constantly. And the deckhands would come along. If you had a fish on, they would come and say, if you get tired, if you need help, I'm right here. I'll take over for you and give you a break. And that happened a few times. One lady actually got a 127-pound fish. It was pretty incredible. That was a massive fish. Anyway, so I've got a fish on, and, you know, my husband was right next to me, and he kept saying, are you okay? You know, and I'm fine. I was having a blast. And all of a sudden, I felt him grab the back of my jacket. And I thought he was like trying to get me to let him help, you know, to take my fishing pole away from me. And so I kind of swatted at him and said, I've got it. You know, like, leave me alone. And, you know, I kind of looked back at him. He said, your feet were off the deck. You were leaning so far over, you almost went over. And I didn't have a clue. I was too busy, you know, trying to get that fish in. And it was really pretty funny because I was very protective of that fish. And if it hadn't been for him, I would have landed in the water, and who knows what would have happened. But it was an incredible experience. Now, we've taken lots and lots of trips on charters where you're in a little bit nicer boat and you go out and you watch for whales, or you go look at glaciers, you know, and just kind of tour the fjords. Now, those are terrific trips. I would do that in a heartbeat. We've done quite a few of those, but those are different to me. The fishing trips are a little harsher. You know, you can still have weather when you're doing the fjords trips. Well, I'm just finishing this up. I'm going back and just adding the last few details. So if you give this a try, please put it on Instagram with the hashtag paintingwithbeala so I can see it and I can comment on it. Well, I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, please give me a thumbs up to let me know. And if you haven't already subscribed, please consider subscribing. I have a lot more videos coming up real soon. Thanks so much, and I hope to see you in a couple of weeks.